This episode goes out to Betty from Denver, Colorado.
Hi there, Megan Robinson here. Welcome to the 10th episode of the Nightblade Epic Podcast. 10 is a pretty big number. It's hard to believe we've been doing this for over 2 months already. And we want to give our deepest thanks to every single one of you who listens to our show each week. We also want to remind you that your support is what lets us keep doing this show. As we've mentioned in the past, we never plan on doing ads or sponsorships on this show. We don't want to sell you a website host or a meal delivery service, but it does mean the world to us when you buy our books, like the Nightblade audiobook, which you can get on Audible, iTunes, or audiobooks.com, and a host of other websites. Visit underrealm.net/audio to pick up your copy. It could be on your phone in seconds. On a related note, we want to give a huge thank you to Fancy Pentalo for leaving a review. Reviews help other people find this podcast, and the people who leave reviews are some of the coolest people in the world. Be cool like Mr. Pantalo. Do your review today. Okay, now it's time for today's episode. Today you're getting chapters 16 and 17 of Nightblade, as Lauren is being dragged through the streets of Cabris by the constables. Enjoy!
Nightblade, Chapter 16. Lauren slipped, her boots scrabbling on the cobblestones as she almost pitched to the ground. Byrne tightened his vise-like grip on her shoulder, and she winced with pain. "Keep your feet, lest we chop them off," he growled. Fear scattered her thoughts. How had the constables found her so quickly? Where would they take her? The unfairness of it cut her to the bone. It was Zane they pursued, and Zane who should be in their clutches now. "I do not know where the wizard is," she pleaded. "Let me go. I have done nothing." Byrne did not reply. Lauren looked to Corin. The shorter constable's eyes met hers for a moment. His glare seemed resolute, but not so hateful as Byrne's. If she would find leniency with either of them, it would be with Corin. "I am only a forester's daughter. What do you want from me?" Corin's mouth turned down.
"We have questions. You would do well to answer them honestly."
"I have told you, I know nothing." They answered her only with silence. She searched the streets around her for succor, halfway hoping that Annis might return with some plan for her escape. But Lauren had sent Annis's horse running, and in her heart of hearts she did not expect the girl to return. Nothing about the city seemed familiar. Lauren had only vague childhood memories of large buildings and winding streets. Now the buildings seemed smaller, but the streets no less confusing. After the first few turns round street corners, Lauren had swiftly lost all sense of direction. There seemed no rhyme or reason to the place, the roads as varied and directionless as gaps between trees. It made her feel that she was in a strange and unknown forest, her woodcraft useless. Only a few men accompanied her, Corin, Byrne, and 2 more. The other constables had chased after Annis in her headlong flight. Lauren hoped she might face no further punishment for aiding the girl's escape, but she would have done it again. Annis deserved a life free from her mother, at least. Thoughts of Damaris piqued her curiosity. "What happened to the merchant? Is she slain?" Byrne snorted, his voice growing crueler. "She is within the city. In fact, she greatly desires to speak with you when she may." Shock overcame Lauren's fear. "What? But her men attacked you." "Mayhap you should not have fled then." Byrne's fingers tightened again, and Lauren knew her skin would bruise. "Once you left, she halted the fighting and claimed the Magestones were your property." "The what?" said Lauren, utterly lost. Magestones was a foreign word to her.
"We could not gainsay her without you there to defend yourself," said Corin, "though that may not have mattered in the end. The family of Yernin has a long reach, and their influence can be felt even behind the walls of Cabras.
I would have had their heads, and well justified, said Byrne. But that blame goes to you, girl. I do not even know what the things were. Search Damaris's wagons. You will find plenty more, I assure you.
Not now, said Corin. As she spoke, the mayor's envoy arrived with a writ of passage. Her wagons have no doubt been cleared, their cargo well hid.
And all thanks to you, said Byrne. Lauren felt sick. Ennis's action should have cast the king's justice towards Damaris, freeing Lauren to find safe passage to other lands. But it seemed she had aided the merchant's crimes after all, and earned Byrne's ire in doing so. She was trapped, just as surely as when she traveled with the caravan, and without Annis or any other ally, her escape seemed even less likely than before. The constables paused for a moment as a line of carriages proceeded through an intersection. Lauren's eyes flitted back and forth, seeking an opportunity. Byrne must have sensed it, for his grip tightened again. Lauren whimpered as stabbing pain shot through her shoulder. You are hurting me.
Corin scowled. If she will be put to the question, then leave it for the mayor's men. It is not our place.
Nor is it our place to lose the wizard's trail, nor allow smugglers of magestones to wander unmolested, and yet we have done both. I, for one, am tired of duties unfulfilled. And lest you forget, this one sent us on a wild chase through the birchwood while she escaped with our quarry. Corin's frown deepened, but he spoke no further. The carriages passed, and they went on. Lauren's feet, long used to dirt and grass underfoot, soon wearied on the cobblestones. She stumbled more and more. Each time Byrne jerked her upright. Soon she cried out, and each time Corin's mood grew darker. But just as she thought he might speak again, they stopped. Above them loomed a building at least 10 paces tall. Lauren saw 3 rows of windows stretching across its width. She marveled at the sight. Nowhere in the birchwood had she ever seen a building with so much as a second floor. Then she looked closer at the top row of windows and saw the thick steel bars that crossed them. A jail, then. 2 guards stood at the front door, and in their hands they held halberds, tall and gleaming. As Byrne drew close, one of the guards stepped forwards to place his halberd across the entryway. "Hold," he said. "What is this?" "A prisoner for the cells. I am Constable Byrne, and this is my companion Corin. We come from Garsek on the king's business. Let us pass, for we have another runaway to pursue." "The cells are full," said the guard. "We have no room." Byrne's face grew uglier. "Then take off some pickpocket's hand and set them loose. Our business is urgent." The guard drew up straighter, though still shorter than Byrne, and his eyes hardened. "I take no orders from you. The master-at-arms has commanded that no more prisoners be brought here. Try the guardhouse in the eastern district." "A walk that would cost us the rest of the day," said Byrne. "We have no time." "My orders stand," said the guard stubbornly.
"Where is your master-at-arms?"
said Corin, adopting a diplomatic tone.
"Mayhap we could speak with him and convey the urgency of our mission."
The guard's eyes flitted to the broader constable. "His quarters are upstairs, though I doubt his mind will change, even for constables who claim to be on the king's business." Byrne stiffened, but Corin put a placating hand on his shoulder.
"We will attempt in any case. I will go."
"No," snapped Byrne. "I will have words, and when I am through he will wish he had never held up the king's justice. Take the girl." Lauren found herself shoved into Corin's grip too quickly to capitalize on the situation. Byrne took one of the other constables and disappeared within the building. Corin guided her to the side of the doorway. If she would ever have a chance to sway his mind, it would be now. "Constable Corin," she began, "I swear to you under the sky, I played no part in any scheme of the wizard's. He abandoned me as soon as we left the birchwood." Corin's face only grew more stern.
"And before, when you sent us chasing shadows, when you stole supplies to place in the wizard's hands, you played no part in that, did you?"
Lauren's face grew hot. I did not know what crimes he may have committed."
"Yet you knew we pursued him. You will face the king's justice for that, if nothing else. Now silence yourself while we find a place to keep you, for the time being."
"And what then? I cannot imagine I will enjoy the comforts of a roof and daily bread forever."
"We shall see," said Corin.
"We should ready her for the cell, sir," said the other constable, the one who had accompanied them through the city streets. "Take her weapons and such." Corin grunted assent. While the other constable took her arm, Corin knelt at Lauren's feet and squeezed her boots. Beneath the leather he felt her hunting knife, and his fingers plunged within to withdraw it. He stood and grasped her bow, prying it off her, but gently so the string did not break.
"Is that all? It will go better for you if you speak the truth."
Lauren thought for a moment of withholding the dagger, but he would only search her anyway, and lies would not help to sway his mood. "There is a dagger at my waist," she said. Corin nodded and threw back her cloak, and froze. His grim face became a mask of shock. Lauren stared at him, eyes wide, unsure of what to do. "Sir?" said the constable at her arm. Corin seemed to recover himself.
"That is enough here. Get up and see what is taking Constable Byrne so long."
The constable looked at Lauren with a frown. "But, sir—"
"You have an order, constable,"
said Corin, his voice suddenly gruff.
"Obey it."
The man left with a final, doubtful look at Lauren. Under the gaze of the guard at the door, Corin seized Lauren's arm and marched her around the corner to a narrow alley, pushing her into its mouth.
"Your dagger,"
he whispered, glancing over his shoulder as though the High King herself might hear.
"I wish I had seen it earlier. Much trouble might have been prevented."
Lauren swallowed, her thoughts spinning. She had no idea what he meant, but he had sent away his only companion to speak with her alone. That had to mean something, and she must choose her reply carefully. "How was I to know I should reveal it to you?"
Corin shook his head quickly. "Of course, I did not mean you were at fault. Only I would have done a great many things differently. This was not your intention, was it? Do they require you to be placed within the prison?"
They. The constable's emphasis on the word had been unmistakable. Who were they? Lauren knew only that it must have something to do with her dagger. "They do not," she said quickly. "I must remain free to carry out their work. And," Lauren added, struck by inspiration, "to continue my pursuit of the wizard." Corin's eyes flooded with relief.
"Then I do not abandon my duty by releasing you. Find him, then, and bring him to their justice. Though I wish it were the king's, I think he will find yours less to his liking."
"Indeed," said Lauren, her heart racing. Could this mean what she thought?
"Go, then."
Corin glanced over his shoulder one last time. He shoved the hunting knife and bow into Lauren's hands. She hastily returned them to their places.
"I shall make it look as though you overcame me, and when you return to your masters, tell them I helped you."
"I will," said Lauren in an earnest tone she did not have to feign. "And I promise you, Constable Corin, they will be grateful." She turned with a whirl of her black cloak and started down the alley, but a thought seized her, and she turned back one last time. "Constable," she said, "where did the girl's mother go? The merchant, Damaris?"
Corin's lips pressed tightly together. "The Wormwing Inn in the north of Cabras. But if I may advise, my lady, I would warn you away from that place. Her guards will seek you out most eagerly, and they do not share our mutual respect for your masters."
"Your advice is well given and well heeded, Constable Corin. Fare thee well." She turned and vanished into the alley with a flutter of black cloth. Nightblade, Chapter 17. Lauren ran until she could no longer see the jail towering above the neighboring buildings, and then ran several minutes more. Once she felt safely away from the place, she found a narrow gap between two buildings and slipped inside, doubling over to catch her breath. The air reeked of human refuse and rang with the sounds of shouting men and crying children. Lauren decided she rather hated the city. She must find Annis. Mayhap the girl had abandoned Lauren to the constables, or mayhap she had planned to return and rescue her. But Lauren must give her the benefit of the doubt, and not just for honor's sake. Lauren knew precious little about Cabris, or the lands beyond, and Annis seemed wise in all the ways Lauren was not. Her eyes raked the narrow alley, wondering which way to proceed. Her absent mind sent fingers brushing her dagger's hilt. At the feel of its leather, her attention snapped to it. What was this thing she carried upon her hip that could enspell a constable into abandoning his duty? Who were they, the unknown masters Corin had spoken of? The dagger seemed more useful now, but altogether more dangerous. For anyone powerful enough to sway a constable must surely have enemies just as powerful. But whatever Corin knew of the dagger, not everyone shared the knowledge. Damaris had seen it, but had granted it no special significance. This was some shadowed knowledge, then, some great secret that surrounded the thing. Lauren wondered if she would ever learn the truth. For now, she must think only of finding Annis. Lauren drew her cloak closer, covering the dagger against curious, knowing eyes. Then she emerged from the alley and into the street, wandering south and east, away from the jail. Before long, her stomach spoke, so she found a bakery and bought a roll with 2 pennies from the purse Annis had given her. She ate idly, losing herself in the streets, eyes traveling everywhere. In her forest she had had a keen sense of direction, but that proved useless here. She had to stop every few minutes to observe the sun and ensure she maintained a southeasterly course. Every building seemed new and confusingly different, and yet just like all the others. Then she saw something that was familiar, red leather armor. A pair of constables emerged from a door along the street, and Lauren's heart froze. But just as she readied herself to flee for the nearest alley, the men burst into raucous laughter and threw their arms about each other. Together they stumbled off down the street, and from inside the building Lauren heard many loud voices raised in laughter and song. A tavern. Lauren sighed with relief and resolved to keep a warier eye. Soon Lauren found herself coming under the gaze of many passers-by. Some eyes took in the length of her fine black cloak, while others fixed upon the bow at her back. Fine clothing and simple weapons, these were an oddity, and many seemed to remark upon them. Lauren kept her head down and her eyes averted. She did not wish for tales of a green-eyed girl in a fine black cloak to reach the constables. It would not do to rely very heavily on Corin's protection. Eventually the curious eyes grew too heavy. Lauren ducked down an alley, feeling better as her wariness abated. She thought of removing the cloak and stowing it in her travel sack, but that might worsen things considerably. Lauren had well noted that she looked different from most in Cabris. She had seen complexions of all hues, but few as pale as hers, and not once had she seen eyes of green. No, she must retain the cloak, though it brought its own kind of attention. She could find a simpler one later, but she had seen no clothiers yet, and she did not know where to look for one. Lauren walked farther down the alley to find a surprise. Where she thought it ended, instead it split both left and right. Both directions proceeded behind the buildings for many yards before turning once more. Mayhap she could make her ways through the city's shadows, then. Annis had even said something about hiding in the city's poorer parts when they entered. If Annis still walked free, she would likely seek the dark corners behind buildings as well. So Lauren followed the alleys, keeping to the shadows of taverns and houses. She had to cross unsavory puddles and gingerly sidestep piles of refuse, but at least she avoided most eyes. Every so often she saw desolate beggars and cripples, all of them curled up in corners. Some eyed her with interest, and 1 or 2 rose, but Lauren flashed her dagger, and they vanished. That gave her a thrill, and she felt her confidence growing. Soon she made a game of leaping from darkness to darkness, avoiding the sunlight at all costs. Lauren fancied that she looked a bit like Menet dancing with his shadows. When a beggar would look up at the sound of her footsteps, she would dart to the nearest doorway and shroud herself in blackness until they looked away. After a while, she tired of the game. It brought her no closer to Annis. The next time Lauren saw a beggar, instead of dancing by, she walked right up to the woman. The beggar seemed impossibly old, her face holding more wrinkles than space in between. Still, her shriveled eyes glinted bright within their sockets, and those eyes tilted up sharply at Lauren's approach. Lauren kept an easy look on her face, but her hand hovered, ready for the dagger. "Well met, friend," said Lauren. "Mayhap you could help me."
"Mayhap not as well, for I have no friends."
The woman had a voice like an iron pot flung down a rocky slope.
"It depends on what help you seek, and what gifts you have for those who aid you, out of the goodness of their hearts."
Lauren smiled and reached to her belt. From her purse she pulled a silver penny. But when the woman held forth grubby hands to claim it, Lauren danced it back on her fingers, a trick she had learned from Bracken long ago. "Now then," said Lauren, "where would one go to find more like you, and worse besides?" The old woman's lips drew back in a sneer. Lauren nearly flinched at the sight of her old and well-browned teeth.
"You're headed the right way already. Keep your feet pointed south and east, and you'll find the scum-sucking backside of this place soon enough."
"Thank you." Lauren flipped the coin into the air, and the beggar woman caught it deftly, shoving it up her sleeve. Lauren pulled another from her purse. "Another thing. I seek a young girl, mayhap one running from constables. She stands as high as my chest, with skin like the night and a fine purple dress. Have you seen her?" The old woman shrugged.
"See all kinds I do, and not just here. Oft-times I make for the streets, where folk are plentiful and their coins more so. I seen plenty like what you say along the street. Young nobles' daughters love to flounce about on their pretty ponies with steel-clad guards close by, just to remind the rest of us how fat their bellies are."
Lauren could not hide her disappointment. Still, she flipped the coin. It, too, disappeared into the old woman's sleeve. "Very well. May your day be bountiful."
"It shall,"
said the woman, with a curious leer. Lauren felt a heavy blow against her back. She cried out and bounced against the wall beside the old woman, crashing to the ground on hands and knees. Another heavy blow struck her ribs, and she flipped to her back. A young man, skinny as a sapling but wiry with muscle, fell atop her. His grasping fingers seized her wrist as she went for the dagger, while his other hand groped at her purse.
"Younglings do not do well to flash around so much silver," said the old woman, looking down at Lauren with vicious amusement. "They get all kinds of eyes on them what they do not want. We would just as soon not open you up, girl. Give us what else you may."
Atop her, the young man gave a mad laugh as his fingers wrapped around the coin purse. But if he thought Lauren a helpless young maid far from help and home, he thought wrong. Not for nothing had Chet forever refused to wrestle with her after his third try. The man held her dagger hand, but he had neglected the other. Lauren clapped it against his ear. He released her wrist, howling, and Lauren slapped his other ear. He tumbled off her and hunched over his knees, glaring with hate. Lauren gained her feet, ready when he came again. She took his first punch on her shoulder and sank her fist into his gut. His breath left in a whoof, acrid and foul, and she struck him again just left of his temple. He fell back again, blinking hard. Then a knife flashed into his palm. Lauren's eyes widened, and he came after her. It was all she could do to avoid his wild slashing. As she ducked and stepped back at the same time, her boot landed on her cloak and sent her crashing to the ground. She recovered and rose just in time, his blade slicing the air where she had lain. "Hold!" she cried, though she knew it was a mad request. He did not mean to scare her. He meant to slit her throat and take the purse from her cooling corpse. Still, she tried again while scrabbling for her dagger. "Hold!" She heard her only reply in the old woman's cackle. But just as her fingers closed on the dagger's hilt, from the shadows of a doorway stepped another figure. Its fist lashed forth to mash into the young man's face, and Lauren saw the gleam of a metal gauntlet. The gutter snipe crumpled like a puppet with cut strings. Lauren looked for the old woman, but she had gone, vanishing into the twists of the alley. Lauren's rescuer stood with his back to her. She could see only a red cloak thrown over broad shoulders, above which a shock of gray hair spoke of age, but as he turned around, Lauren was surprised to find light blue eyes set in a face free from a beard and almost free of wrinkles. Not as young as she, but mayhap not much older than Zane. Still, she could not deny the heavy wisdom that weighed in his eyes. The man had a face that Bracken would have called a grandfather's soul in his grandson's head. Her fingers relaxed on the hilt of her dagger and emerged from her cloak. Those old eyes caught the movement. He studied her for a moment, as though he were thinking what to say, and then spoke in a soothing voice. "Did his blade kiss you?" Lauren shook her head. "No, I am no stranger to knife fights." She was, but thought it might not be wise to admit. This man could be a thief as well, and if so, he seemed more capable than the gutter snipe. He smiled at her words, and she wondered if he heard the lie inside them. But all he said was, "Indeed." Silence stretched for a distance that neared awkward. Lauren studied the man while pretending to look anywhere else. He stood of average height, but something in his composure made him appear much taller. Lauren felt herself a small child in his presence. Under his dark red cloak he wore a shirt and sleeves of chain, as well as gauntlets of gleaming steel that folded over themselves. Some strange symbol clasped the cloak at his throat. 3 vertical rods bound by a ring like a shock of wheat, and wings sprouting from either side. Lauren had never seen anything like it. His hair he wore close-cropped, and no trace of stubble dusted his chin. Lauren realized how long she had inspected him and cleared her throat, trying to think of what to say. At last she said, "Thank you for your assistance, though I could have bested him. I am fortunate, I suppose, that you ensured it." "Fortunate, yes," said the man, his voice holding a trace of amusement. "Though my presence was no happenstance. I saw you quite some time ago, skulking from shadow to shadow. I hazarded a guess that you might be a stranger to these streets, and deemed it prudent to follow you in case you should find them less hospitable than you might wish." Lauren thought of that, and what a fool she must have looked to this imposing man. She straightened. "If you thought me in true danger, you need not have troubled yourself." She nudged the man on the ground with the toe of her boot. "This one would have found me a pricklier foe than I look." "Of that I have no doubt," said the man, inclining his head and taking a step back. "I know I may take my leave in assurance of your safety, now that you have had a taste of Cabris's streets and alleys." "Very well, then," said Lauren, strangely sad to see him go. He nodded, turning it into a half-bow, and walked away. But just as he reached the corner and prepared to round it, he paused. After a moment he turned back, his blue eyes squinting slightly. "How long since you arrived in the city, if I may ask?" Lauren shrugged. "One loses track." "Indeed." He could put such hidden meaning in that simple word. "I'm seeking a man. Mayhap you've seen him. Not overly tall, but neither is he short. Of just about your height, in fact. His hair falls in waves, and his eyes are a pale gray-brown. He may have worn a blue coat." His description of Zane was so perfect that Lauren could not help herself. She stood flabbergasted, her mouth falling open in shock. Too late she tried to hide her reaction, and her teeth clicked as they shut. He stiffened. "You have seen him?" "Never," said Lauren. "I only wondered what sort of fool would walk about in a bright blue coat. If I had seen him, he would be lighter a coin purse, I can assure you." He took a step forwards, and Lauren tensed, but he moved only out of eagerness, and made no move to grip a weapon or attack. "It is most urgent that I find this man. I would offer a mighty reward for any information that led to his location." He drew back his red cloak to show his belt, and Lauren saw 2 fat purses hanging there. But she also saw a sword. Almost she felt tempted, but something held her back. Lauren knew nothing of this man or his intentions, and whatever Zane had done, he had not earned her betrayal. So she shrugged and raised her eyebrows. "Gladly will I take your purse if it weighs so heavily at your belt, but I fear you would gain nothing from the purchase. I will admit an urge to lie and give you worthless information, but I will not cheat a man who tried to save my life, needless though his aid might have been." The man studied her a long moment, and Lauren felt bare beneath his piercing gaze. I do not seek to harm the wizard, he said in an even voice. I ask you to remember that. If by some chance you should discover something about him, I would beg that you find me. While I remain in the city, you may find me at the Wormwing Inn. He turned and left.
This has been a production of Legacy Books, written and narrated by Garrett Robinson. The music in this podcast was created by Will Musser. Check out his incredible work at willmusser.com. That's WILLMUSSER.com. Today's letter is I. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.